Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob Restituto, and I'm a musician from Northport, New York. And today we have the absolute pleasure of having Irko here on the channel. Irko is a multi-platinum winning, or multi-platinum producing, mixing. I guess mixing is the best word for this conversation. He's worked on multi-platinum track. Let's put it that way. And I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with him today. So, Irko, thank you so much for taking the time.
Jacob, thank you for having me. I'm very glad that we're doing this, and let's do it.
Absolutely, man. So, for those that haven't heard a little bit about you, can you give a little bit of backstory on the stuff that you've worked on and who you are in the music industry and your personal life?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Irko. I'm the music industry most beloved bow tie wearing mixing engineer. I grew up in Venice, Italy, but I moved to New York. That's what we were just talking about. Um, uh, 15, 16 years ago to pursue the music career of how they say to you they used to tell you, it's hard, there's no money in music, whatever, all true, but add to that the factor of dealing with immigration, dealing with moving to another country, dealing with learning a new culture, learning a new language, the whole thing. So whatever doubters you had, I had 100 times more.
So, let's start with that really quick, actually. I'd love to hear
Mhm.
that. So, what brought you from Italy to New York? Like, just the desire for the music industry in New York? And then also, why New York over LA?
Right. Yeah, for sure. So this is the MySpace era. So the internet was not starting, but social media, as you might want it, as it became known as years later, was just pioneering. Basically, was just the very beginning of it. And on my top 10 on my MySpace page, I had this guy, B Money, a very good friend of mine, still to this day, 20 years later. And basically, we have been working on a bunch of records online. So this was when I had to share files from one computer to the other via Bluetooth, which took forever. And then I had to send it off on AIM or on Skype or any of those things. And we had done a bunch of records. So we got to know each other and we became kind of like a duo, like a team. He would make the beats and I would mix the record when the record existed. And so yeah, eventually he moved to New York City, and he started to make a name for himself there. And I kind of went with the package digitally, I guess, right? And then eventually I got on a plane, went to New York City, and tried to see what was going on. Really, the goal of that first trip in 2006 was to kind of get the scoop of how big recording studios in the city were ran. So it was more about like me as a studio owner, which at the time I had opened my second studio called Studio B2, and it was all basically ready to go, and like the equipment was in there and everything, but I wanted to see how I could improve it or get international clientele or whatever. So that was really like the big goal for me for that trip. But I went back home to Italy with a double platinum award for working with Jay-Z with my buddy B Money. So that was like first a great welcome to America kind of gift, the land of opportunity. Here we go.
Yeah, man, for sure. So let's
But then at the same
let's.
time,
Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Continue.
I was gonna say just at the same time, it was like, okay, now I got this stamp of approval or recognition of that magnitude. And I'm like, I need to do something about that. So the proverbial snowball started to roll, and here we are 20 years later, still doing the same thing, basically.
Absolutely, I love that, man. It's such a. I love what you said, the land of opportunity, man, because people can see, first of all, New York or just America, but New York in general is a place that can chew you up and spit you out. But it's all perspective, man. There's so much opportunity as long as you're looking for the looking for the opportunity in the right places and willing to kind of stick around for it, because sometimes it takes time to get that opportunity. So I would love to hear first off, kind of how that relationship with Jay Z came about, where you even got that first gig, and then from that, the proverbial snowball, as you called it, like how did that grow and how did that build, and it's maybe some sort of timeline. Did it happen overnight? Was it a gradual? Like how did it grow from there?
So in the very beginning, and really that's still the core under which I operate, has always been to give more than what I'm asking for. So that exchange, I try to make it so that it's more beneficial for the person in front of me or on the other side of the thing, right? And so that's kind of how it happened. In the very beginning, to me, it was about showing people what I do, what I can do, what I was happy to do, and what I had to provide and bring to the table rather than getting that check. Now, obviously, we all need the money. That's goes without saying, but my focus has always been, and even more so in the very beginning, where when I didn't have the Grammys and the plaques and stuff like that, was about, okay, I want to be an asset to whatever's happening here, whether if that's a recording session or tuning or mixing, whatever the case, right? So that was really the snowball was created because of that. Like I was always out there to give more than to receive. So in that scenario, when you are offering that kind of frame of mind, it's like, why would someone not have somebody like that in their team?
Hmm.
It's just makes no sense for them not to do that. And even though in the short term it's costly, because of course if you're not profiting a lot from all these sessions that you're doing, it can be, I have stories which I'm very happy to share with you in a minute, but it's about the struggle of saying, okay, I'm building something here. So even though I'm not getting a check, I'm not putting the money in the bank, I'm putting this virtual money into my career, which is a lot more important. And I always say to the assistants, the kids that are around me, or anyone that I'm working with that need a little bit of guidance, it's so much more important to gain a relationship rather than gain $100,
Hmm.
$1,000, $10,000. The relationship is so much more worth that money in the bank, which again, I understand we all need, obviously, but it's a lot more to it than just a check. So that's how it started. The progress of building this unstoppable movement that eventually led me to operate out of this place. And as you were mentioning and touching upon a little bit earlier, the relationship with the celebrities, I still to this day do not really pursue that. I I always say that I'm the producer's best friend because of course I'm an asset. I'm one of their instruments to get their sounds, their beats, their ideas out in the world, right? Um, so I feel like the marriage between the engineer, especially the mix engineer, but also the recording and the producer, is so important, so much more important than having the relationship with the artist. Which, of course, again, it's not one of those things that we turn down or that we do not do. But at least in my experience, in my career, the entire thing is often being driven by the producer slash engineer relationship and marriage. And then the talent usually kind of sits on that and blossoms off of that. That, or at least that's my view. I don't know. So all to say that a lot of celebrities might not even know who I am. I don't know if Jay-Z knows about me. I don't know. I mean, we did something on Donda and stuff, but recently, I mean, but I don't know if they know who I am. I don't think
Yeah,
so. I don't care,
sure.
honestly. I mean, not to sound cocky or whatever. That's not my role. My role is to get the Sonics dialed in right to make them the celebrities they are. And I'm fine with that. That's my role in life.
Yeah. So it sounds like some key points that you made right there are the fact of like one, you had a long term perspective on your career in the sense of like, hey, I know where I want to be, I know where I believe that I'm going, so I'm willing to take the quote unquote risk or the delayed gratification of paying, or maybe giving more than I'm taking right now, and maybe leaving a little bit of money on the table in order to build a relationship with these producers or artists, so that in the future it can pay off dividends in the future. It's almost to some degree like a blue chip stock where you might not be making a ton right up front, but the dividends that you pay and the reinvested dividends over time kind of grow significantly to something with this compounding interest. Another
That's
thing that,
exactly it.
yeah, man, it's really, I appreciate the long term perspective because so many people are. I think the detriment to so many people, including myself at times, is like we want that gratification of being where we want to be now. Personally, I was just filming a video recently talking about the fact like sometimes especially when I'm getting to the mindset of comparing, looking at, oh, look at this artist, look at that artist, I wish I was just there, kind of thing. We say, I start looking for the immediate thing what's the thing that I could do next that could like really, catapult me to where I want to go. And it's like, there really isn't anything that I could do. And then I get frustrated and don't do anything, but in the reality, it's just these small steps that got me to where I am today. And the small steps continue to get me to where I'm going tomorrow. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
exactly what it is. It's one mix at a time, right?
yeah. And also a little bit counterintuitively, oftentimes reducing what you are offering to the world. And so saying no to some things have the interesting B side of making you a lot more effective and a lot more important in the things that you do choose to focus on.
Can
Therefore, instead of being the Walmart of things that, Walmart sells 100,000 items, I think, or whatever the number is, it's like a crazy amount of items. You'd rather become that person, that shop, that store that has the one thing. So whenever, somebody's looking for that one thing, they come to you. Now, obviously, you reduce dramatically the pool of people that could be your potential clients. But on the other end of that, you get a lot more personable and more selective with what you're doing. You go from being McDonald's serving, 50 million people every day to the shop that sells custom made yachts that deals with 5 clients every day
yeah.
or every year.
Absolutely. So I would love that's a great analogy, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that in the sense of like more specific context. To like, for example, how did you, how were you not the Walmart and more of the boutique in your industry?
So this is entirely dependent on the market you're in. So there's a big deal of geography that goes into this kind of thing, or
Mm.
at least in my experience, coming from a very small town in a small country that does not export. Italy is, we don't listen to Italian music in Tokyo. It's not going to happen, right? But they are going to listen to American hip hop or American music in general in different parts of the world, right?
Mm.
So coming from a small market, I had to be the one-stop shop for everything. A person might come in with a guitar riff and walk away with a CD. That tells you when that happened also, right? So in that case, I needed to be able to provide everything to these clientele. Therefore, I had a lot more of these potential clients. When I stopped doing production, when I stopped doing the recording, when I stopped doing editing and tuning and all of that stuff, I basically focused my entire attention and business onto one thing, that's mixing. So you might think, well, why would you leave money on the table or the opportunity to be able to do so much more for your clientele? But that's kind of the reason why, a lot of brands, there's no off-roader from Bugatti, there is no van from Ferrari.
Mm.
That's exactly the same reason. That's also why Ferrari doesn't have ads or commercials, right? Because their clientele is very, very specific and they're in tune with them. So I don't want to say that one way is better or it should be one way or the other. There's a place for McDonald's, just like there's a place for the 3-star Michelin restaurant. Like I said earlier, McDonald's feeds 50 million people. The Michelin restaurant feeds maybe 50 people every year. Very different business models, both probably successful and fitting for one setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I started with everything, and then I just slowly removed all the things that I didn't want to invest in and that I felt like I would have less longevity in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That's very important.
Yeah, a really
You wanna
interesting. Oh, sorry, a really interesting key point that you just made. Like, I don't even know if you noticed you said it, but like you said, you slowly started getting rid of the things because it's interesting. I think so many people are like, okay, that means today I'm stopping everything that's not productive to my
yeah.
career, which can also be
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
detrimental.
Yeah, because it's a fine tuning of
Mm.
the situation. How many years are you into this? Have you recorded at some commercial studio for 1 year and now you think you're a mixer? You're not. There's no way you are. So slowly, get your own clientele. That's another thing. If you start in an environment like a commercial studio where it's like you are one of the cooks in a big restaurant, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that at some point these guys might want to go solo and do their own thing, maybe starting with a food truck, something a lot smaller, but it's their thing, right? It's the same thing here. You gotta like time it right. You gotta
Mm.
know when to cut the cord and go on your own. And maybe that's not even for everybody. There's plenty of my colleagues that they're not interested in going solo. They're not interested in building studios. They're not interested in any of that. So again, no right or wrong here. It's whatever fits you, and so that you don't get burnt out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a key, is because that's a great point. Actually, I think that I want to elaborate on that for sure, because I think that so many people think that there's these shoulds that we should be doing. I should have my own studio. I should be doing this. I should be releasing music like this or mixing for this person. And the reality is, the only should that you should be doing is being yourself and what's like true to you. And it's like you said, like some people are the entrepreneurial types where they should go out and start their own studio because that's who they are, and some are definitely not. I kind of feel like it's kind of similar to some degree, and I don't know how it gets to when you get to the higher levels of the music industry, but like with artists, where artists start their own labels, don't start their own labels and join a major label, or just stay independent. And it's kind of figuring out who you are. You know, I think that the artists that are terrible at business, there's a probably good chance that they should go with the major label because they're not going to be able to handle their own stuff. Where the really entrepreneurial artists that kind of use both sides of the brain, maybe they do go independent or start their own label. And it's just knowing who you are and being confident in that.
Totally, yeah. It's a suit that you're about to wear, and make sure the suit is comfortable to you, fits you, because you're the only person that's gonna wear that suit.
Hmm.
So you need to be comfortable, and sometimes you not need to understand what's comfortable and what's not to you, and which is why I'm saying that any rash decisions or
Hmm.
decisions that have not been pondered are usually just a jump in the dark that turns to be not like the smartest move, you know. So go slow. You know, this is ideally a career that you're gonna rock out for 40 years. So there's plenty of time, you know. Figure it out slowly but surely. You're gonna get to it.
100%, man. I really appreciate that because we're so many people are in a rush, including myself sometimes, for sure. But I would love to continue to like a tangent off of what you mentioned about building a studio. I was doing a little research and I saw that whole, I guess we called it documentary or series, mini series of you building your studio. And I loved that, man. I thought that was so cool. Where like you literally every step of the way filmed. And there was a ton of footage, man. Like you have footage of everything and breaking down what you did and why. And as somebody that films pretty much everything myself, like in the sense of I'm making music, I'm filming, setting up a concert, I'm filming. I loved that model, and I would love to hear your perspective on why you did that and what it is to you.
So what I did was taking the longest, most expensive, most difficult route to go about having my own place, my shop in which I operate out of, right? I say the longest, the most difficult because I decided not to go with adapting a pre-existing warehouse or like a place that was there already. I instead built this from ground up, literally. So that's why I'm saying it was the most expensive, the most difficult, the most elaborate way to go about it. But now every single person that walks into this room and hears music here, they're it's a mind-boggling physical experience, quite literally. And so it was very difficult. It was a lot. It was a lot, like 6 years in the making to erect this building from
Mm.
ground up in concrete with in California, the most earthquake unfriendly space to do that, and most expensive real estate ever almost.
Mm.
So it was difficult, but I'm very happy. And yes, I documented the whole thing because how many times do you get to see a task of that size being presented to show what I've done, and which if you get to see the entire process and then you get to visit the place, you'll
Mm.
see how this came to be. It's not just magic or
Yeah.
whatever, which I would like to think this place is magical, of course, but it's all about how much work and love has been put into this place. But yeah, 6 years later, man, here we are, Studio B3. This is the big control room. Behind those diffusers, there's the booth, which is the best looking and sounding booth on the planet, if you ask me. And then behind there, there's a studio two, and then a lounge, and then a lounge outside too. So this place lends itself very well for just about anything, including writing camps, one of which we've done yesterday.
Wow.
And then, of course, a million sessions and immersive mixes, stereo mixes, writing, producing, you name it, we can probably make it happen here. And a lot of parties too.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's so good. So I would love to. You mentioned a bunch of different things that you do in your studio, and I would love to hear what the day in the life of Irko looks like. You know, maybe a couple different scenarios of what typically you're working on, how you're working on it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, my sessions and my days here are pretty much almost always the same. And it's actually very simple. I start working in the studio around between 9 and 11 in the morning. That's kind of when it happens. And then I rock out until lunch break. And then when lunch break comes, I'm back in maybe like an hour later or something. And then I'll rock it out until maybe 5 or 6 p.m. And that's when the second session starts, which is usually done by my chief house engineer. He usually records vocals in the early evenings. But basically, between the two studios, we got six sessions happening every day. So three in here, three in there, 8 hours each, and that's how we kind of rock it out.
So how much of it is devoted in your studio to the actual production side of the engineering and recording, and versus the pretty much, I guess, post production of mixing, and I don't know if you guys do mastering as well, but the post
Yeah,
versus pre.
I only do mixing. That's all I do. I don't record anymore. I don't tune. I don't edit vocals or anything like that. So I only do that every day, basically. I mix about 250 records every year. So it's like an ongoing, non-stop machine constantly going, you know?
That's about one
Uh,
per workday, I believe. I think what
Pretty
there's
much.
248, I think, work days in a year. So if you're
Yeah,
working
yeah,
Monday
yeah.
through Friday, that's about a one per workday.
That's exactly it. Yes. Considering that this includes the actual mix work, of course, but then also revisions and prints, that's a lot of work because, it takes about a day to mix a record, more or less. And then all the extra work that goes with it, creating stems, prints, and deliverables, and revisions and sessions with clients, attended sessions, that is. It's a lot. So it's a lot of work. Yeah. But 8 hours every day ish, and I rock it out. And then any recording that happens here will be with either my chief house engineer or third party engineers that rent the studio as like a rental. And then of course production stuff too. Of course that happens a little bit less because producers and uh, songwriters don't have to do their work in a recording studio. That can be done anywhere, but some people of course prefer to do that in the studio. And honestly, the second studio is perfectly fit for that. So that's the typical day in a working day for me. And then weekends, I'm out the studio, I'm playing around with my cars. That's
I
what I do.
love that. I love that. You mentioned printing with printing your mixes. I'm curious what you mix on. Do you mix analog? Do you mix in the box? Do you mix between both? How does that work for you personally?
So even though I have all the usual suspects for recording studios here, preamps, compressors, and stuff like that, my mix is entirely on Pro Tools. So I don't leave the computer once the audio has reached the computer, whether if that was coming from another DAW or Pro Tools or was recorded. I don't leave Pro Tools personally, though everything is wired here. So if another engineer wants to come in here and work with hardware inserts and use the real units, they're here.
So no in the board like Neve consoles or anything like that. Like it's all mixed inside of Pro Tools.
That's my console.
Oh, that is fascinating, man. That is
Yeah,
so
yeah. And
wild
even
in the sense of like I love seeing that because it's so I think that it's so quote unquote unstereotypical of what you might think about like a very successful career in the music industry because everybody thinks, oh, I need more gear, I need more gear, I need more gear, I need more gear, and here is literally a blank table with you and your computer, and it's just
yeah,
remarkable.
it's the ear, not the gear, man. And this is the guy telling you that uh, I have a mixer in storage. Yeah, I built two new studios in 2021 and two, no mixer in sight. The
Hmm.
thing is still in storage. No, the truth of the matter is that, in my opinion, the workflow in maybe even 10 years ago did not require a console at all, unless you're recording bands. Then in that scenario, it's still a lot easier to have, small and large faders over 40 tracks or however many recording at once. It's a lot easier. Having preamps in lunch boxes and in racks or whatever and control that's a lot bit more difficult.
But
So
sonically,
with
you
that,
don't find a difference between like an analog board versus mixing in the box.
no, no, not anymore. Not only that, but the operating in the digital realm allows you to have so much more flexibility. So even though, yes, there's definitely a thing with working with a console and writing it hot and having the meter slamming and all of that stuff, there's definitely undoubtedly something to it. But whatever it is, there's one of it. It's that one console sound. That's it. On If you're operating in the digital realm, that sound, which you still can achieve, by the way, it might not be exactly the same, obviously, but you have infinite flavors of that. And not to mention the footprint, the real estate that you need to have for that, because that takes a lot of space. That takes a lot of acoustics. It's still somewhat of a flat surface right in between you and the speakers, right? a lot of power. You need to keep that oven on all the time.
Mm.
Some of the older ones you don't even really want to turn off. And then maintenance, and then you gotta have a AC blowing over it, which makes noise. It's you see what I mean? It's like
That I can't believe that, man. It's actually really, really fascinating. That's amazing.
yeah, it's you know what it is? It's technology of 30 years ago.
Yeah,
And there's definitely some romanticism connected to
yeah.
that. And I mean, this is the guy that is driving a car that's 67 years old.
I,
That's what I drive. Obviously, is a Model S or a Model 3, whatever new Tesla electric car is way better of an experience than driving around, uh, a boat,
yeah.
obviously. But there's something to it. That's why I drive vintage cars. So I'm not trying to, uh, you know, talk down or any other
No,
colleague that
absolutely.
wants to do it and needs to do it by all means. And I was the guy too. I've been rocking on consoles for decades.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in my personal flow nowadays, no need.
That's so fascinating, man, and it's actually really encouraging because you're right. It's not the gear. It's not the gear. It's the ear. And I very, very, very similar quote from Chris Geringer, the mastering engineer. I had an interview with him a couple months back, and he was saying the same exact thing. I was asking him some about his workflow, and he was saying he was telling me some of the plugins he uses. I'm like, that's a $200 plugin. Like, here's this guy that's working on Grammy nominated stuff, and he's using the plugin that anybody can get, and it just again blew my mind of like, man, it's really not in the gear that you're using. It's all, and he was explaining it's all about the experience of. He's been doing this for 40 years. You know what I mean? Like it's that experience of you can have the best gear in the world, and I tell an example all the time for the people that have heard my videos and stuff. Like when I was recording a couple years back, I had this really cheap microphone, like ridiculous. And I was like, okay, I got hired to do a song for somebody. So I was like, okay, I'm going to borrow my friend's microphone, like way more expensive microphone. I plugged it in, recorded, and it sounded terrible because I didn't know how to use it. You know what I mean? And I went back to my regular, really cheap mic, and it sounded 100 times better. And it's like, I work with what you know and just get really good with it. And obviously, of course, you upgrade and stuff, but to some point,
Yeah,
there's really no point in upgrading when you're content and the quality's there.
totally.
That's
Totally.
so
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating,
And
man.
there's also like this thing to where, people are doubting themselves and they're like always like, well, it's probably not me, so it's gotta be something else. It's gotta be that API preamp that I don't have, which is precluding me from having platinum plaques. Nope. Nah, nah, man. It's probably you. You
Oh
just
shoot,
probably need to
man.
work a little bit more.
That's a bit of a confidence check, like a humility
Yeah.
check.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
humbling. That's humbling for sure. I love that, man. So I would love to hear, based on somebody that's worked on several hit tracks, I would love to hear your perspective. And of course, there's no right or wrong answer. This is all completely subjective to your perspective. But how do you define a hit song? What's a hit song for you?
I think is one that transcends the genre. So, like, if the song is being heard and known by a vast majority, the vast majority of population, and it's not really related to that specific audience that the artist has, that's a hit. It's a hit song. A lot of people, drop that hit quality for any songs. I don't think it's a hit unless my uncle knows it. You know what I mean?
Mm. For sure. And do you find that those hit songs that actually do transcend genre have any common, not necessarily theme, but commonalities between them?
I would say that they talk to and they find the audience that's relatable to that message in a very wide kind of way. Like it doesn't matter if you're this color or that color, if you're that age or this age, whatever. Good art finds
Mm.
its way into the heart of the audience, and a soul is a soul. It doesn't really matter. Like that song that said, when I was 13, everybody has been 13. That's
Mm-hmm.
like an amazing way to open it up. Everybody has had their heart broken. That's why love oftentimes it's a very typical theme, right?
Yeah.
So that's usually the magnet I think that attracts a hit song is the relatability to the audience. The vastest one, the better, I think.
That's very, very fascinating. Absolutely. I'd love to pivot again to your ears and mixing essentially. In the sense of, in your experience, I would love to hear what your perspective is. Say an artist has limited funds, right? Do you think that it's best to spend those funds in the like the pre-recording, essentially on the getting a really good raw recording, or in the aspect of like post, which is like the mixing? Like, is it worth spending the money on the mix after the fact, like hiring a really great mixer, or getting really, really, really good recordings up front?
Well, every single step of the way is important. There's not one step that's a little bit less important
Sure,
than
sure,
the other.
sure, sure.
The rule of thumb, at least the way I've been telling, um, a lot of my clientele is try to think, record like there's no mix and mix like there's no master, that kind of thing. So same thing with the writing, if your songwriting relies on punch ins that you have to record on Pro Tools when you're ready to track the vocal, chances are that song is not going to be able to be performed live properly. So, the most streamlined, the most simple approach on all of these steps, the better it is, and the quality goes kind of with it. If you have a great recording, chances are you're not going to have to solve problems at mixing, but you're going to be able to just get the creative view of the song, and that's kind of it. You just go with making it as your heart feels rather than fixing problems, right? That being said, there's a lot of things that can be taken in consideration when recording, even at the lowest of budgets, which basically cost nothing. So like something like, instead of putting the microphone next to a wall, try to put it in the middle of the room, right? Or maybe instead of putting it in the kitchen where there's a lot of reflective surfaces, put it next to an open closet so that the clothes can absorb some of that high-end reflections. So those things are just next to free, and they improve a great deal the quality of recording. Obviously, nothing substitute being able to go to a proper studio to record properly. So that's still the best thing, and that's still, I feel, the best use of the money, because when you are paying, even say you're paying $2,000 to record a song, which is very high, but let's say you just spend that, assuming you go to a proper studio and everything, you're gonna have access to a set of gear and a set of technical skills from the engineers that are well worth 700 times that. So that makes it, to me, a no-brainer to go for it. It's kind of like, okay, do I want to go to Home Depot and buy the wood and the nails and the tools to build this little shed, or do I just give the money to somebody that has done it for 20 years and they're just gonna do it beginning to the end, clean up and all, and it's done? I think I more of in that sense, but it's not for everybody. A lot of times you don't know what you don't know, so you think, well, shit, just buy a microphone off of Craigslist, set it up, yeah, record. What's the problem? Yeah, you can.
Yeah, and especially when then you have the influx of bedroom producers that, like, now are on the radio. That's like, oh well, if so and so can do it, so can I. If the Chainsmokers can do it, or Phineas can do it, or all these people can do it, why can't I? Like, here's all these radio hits. Or then especially with the influx of TikTok music, which I have nothing against, but like, you're right. If you see all these things like where, oh, this person did it in their bedroom, that person did it in the bedroom. There's also just innate talent some people have, and we also don't know that their history of, maybe they have been recording for 15 years, and they know not to record in the kitchen, like you said, or some, for example.
Right. Yeah, every time I hear those things, it's like reducing a story this big to an atom, and it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, really, Lewis Hamilton driving a car, he does the same thing I do when I go to the grocery store, right? He's driving a fucking car. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating perspective, man. I really appreciate that. No, man. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I appreciate your time very much. So in wrapping it up, I love to ask people, as a final question, what is one thing that you currently know now in your career that you wish you knew when you first started off?
Direction is more important than speed, so
And elaborate on that. I want to hear more on that.
Seeing the progress and you seeing your career moving to the right direction is a lot more important than getting to this point where you think you're going to want to be and just be there.
Absolutely.
Usually careers, just like relationships and big things in life, take time to build, and the time at which these things take to build usually is also reflective of the longevity of it. In other words, if you become a one-hit wonder overnight, chances are that's probably it. Instead, if you're building a career slowly but surely and rise, um, with the with the peers or amongst yourself, it's you're gonna get to a point where you're all gonna blossom and grow. So that's why I say direction is a lot more important than speed. So obviously we want results and we want to get to wherever we're trying to go as fast as possible. But usually you might want to take a little bit longer and then get to more solid grounds in time.
Mm. Absolutely. That is a wonderful word of wisdom to end on. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you can hang out for 30 more seconds, I just want to first of all say thank you to you, but also thank you to every single person that watched this or listened to this, however you heard it after the fact. And definitely go check out all the stuff that Irko has done. Go check out his social media. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Best way to support this channel is checking out my own original music and subscribing on whatever platform you are listening to or listening on. Have a great rest of your day. God bless and peace out.